Robin Hood by Sally M. Stockton. Chapter 1. Robin Hood becomes an outlaw. Robin Hood was born near the end of the 12th century. His real name was Robert. He was the son of the Earl of Huntingdon. At that time, England had many problems. King Richard was away on a crusade in the Holy Land. He was away many years. His brother, John, became king. He was a cruel and greedy king. His men were arrogant and brutal. The poor people of England suffered a lot. They paid very high taxes to King John and his sheriffs. Many families died of hunger. One day, the cruel sheriff of Nottingham killed Robin's father and took away his lands. Young Robin lost his father, his home, his lands, and all his possessions. He escaped to Sherwood Forest with his loyal servants. They decided to live as free men in the forest. They didn't want to be slaves of King John. However, the king considered them outlaws. When Robin and his men reached Sherwood Forest, they sat down to rest. Robin Hood smiled at his loyal servants. Then he said to them,
"My friends, Sherwood Forest is our new home. Now we are free, but we are outlaws. Everyone in the kingdom is against us."
"Master, we are not afraid because you are with us,"
said Much.
"Yes, I will stay with you, but you must do what I tell you. We must not become robbers. We must never harm the poor, the old, women or children. We must respect and protect them. We take only from rich merchants, noblemen and fat churchmen. Here is my plan. When rich travelers come into Sherwood Forest, we invite them to eat with us. Then they must pay for their food. They must give us half of everything they have. We then give this money to the poor. Do you promise to do what I tell you?"
Yes,
we do, they cried. Robin and the outlaws lived in caverns in the forest. The caverns were a perfect hiding place. They were warm and dry in the winter. In the summer, they were cool. They were happy in the forest. They all wore green clothes and carried bows and arrows. Robin had a horn to give signals. Soon other honest men joined the outlaws of Sherwood Forest, Nat, Will Scarlet, and others. The outlaws were excellent archers. Robin Hood became the best archer in the region. In the forest, Robin and his men practiced with their bows and arrows. Chapter 2. Robin meets Little John. One day, Robin came to a stream with a small bridge. When he began to cross it, he heard a loud voice say,
"I want to cross the stream first."
Robin turned around and saw an enormous young man. He was very tall.
"No, I was first,"
answered Robin.
"Can you push me off the bridge?"
asked the enormous man. He was holding a wooden staff. Robin cut a long branch from a tree and made a staff. Then he began to fight on the bridge. Robin was fast and light. But soon the enormous man pushed Robin into the water. He was very strong. The enormous man laughed. Then he pulled Robin out of the water. Robin started to laugh too.
You are an honest fighter,
said Robin.
What is your name?
My name is John Little. I am an honest man. I fought with good King Richard's men in the Holy Land. I made King Richard's sword and the swords of his men. He is a great king. But his brother, John, is cruel and greedy. I don't want to serve King John. I am looking for Robin Hood. I want to join his outlaws.
Welcome to our merry company of outlaws. I am Robin Hood,
said Robin, smiling.
A friend of King Richard is a friend of mine.
John Little was very surprised. Then the two men embraced and became good friends.
Now that you are an outlaw, you must change your name. Your new name is Little John.
Robin took Little John to the secret hiding place in the forest. The outlaws welcomed Little John with a big meal. Little John was an expert sword maker. Soon every outlaw had a new sword. The outlaws liked Little John because he was friendly and kind. At night, everyone sat around the fire and listened to his stories. He told them about his adventures in the Holy Land. Chapter 3. Friar Tuck joins the outlaws. Will Scarlet told Robin that a big, fat man lived in a cavern near a river in Sherwood Forest. One day, Robin decided to meet him. He went to the river and saw a fat friar who was fishing.
Good morning, young man,
said the friar.
Good day,
answered Robin Hood.
You are fishing in an outlaw river. The fish you catch are mine. You can fish here today, but only if you carry me across the river.
The friar did not like what Robin said, so he looked at him and said,
I can carry you across the river. You are very thin. Can you carry me across the river?
Robin was surprised to hear this.
Of course, I can carry you. I am thin, but I am very strong.
Robin lifted the enormous friar with great difficulty. Then he carried him across the river.
You are very heavy, friar, but I can carry you,
said Robin. At the other side of the river, Robin said,
Now, you must carry me back.
The friar started to carry Robin Hood across the river. But when they arrived at the middle of the river, the friar stopped. He sniffed Robin and said,
Goodness, you smell like an old rat. You need a good cold bath.
And so the friar threw Robin into the cold water. He laughed loudly and then pulled Robin to the riverbank. Robin was angry at first. Then he smiled and said,
You were right. I needed a bath. I feel better now. My good friar, you are free to fish in this river when you want.
Let us shake hands before I go away,
said the friar.
Oh, don't go away,
said Robin.
My name is Robin Hood.
What? You are Robin Hood?
asked the friar. He was very surprised.
Yes, come and live with me and my outlaws. We are all good, honest men. We take from the rich and give to the poor. We want a friar because we need the word of God. What is your name?
I am Friar Michael Tuck of Fountains Abbey. I had a quarrel with my abbot. He was very greedy and rich. He never helped the poor. He forgot God's teachings. When I told him this, he wanted to punish me. I escaped to the forest. Now I live a simple life.
If you want to live a simple life and help the poor, then come to Sherwood Forest,
said Robin. The two men shook hands and promised to be friends for life. Chapter 4. Wanted, Dead or Alive. Some years passed, and there were more than 200 outlaws living in Sherwood Forest. Robin Hood was the hero of the poor. He continued robbing the rich to give to the poor. Robin Hood called this the Sherwood tax. All the rich travellers who passed through Sherwood Forest paid the Sherwood tax. The Sheriff of Nottingham sent an army of soldiers to Sherwood Forest to capture Robin Hood. But Robin and his outlaws were in the trees. They killed all the soldiers except one. Robin and his men were the best archers of the region. They knew the forest perfectly. They were never afraid of fighting the soldiers of the wicked Sheriff of Nottingham. It was impossible to stop Robin Hood. The sheriff was furious because the people laughed at him. He was never able to capture Robin Hood. King John was furious too. His subjects loved King Richard and hated him. One day, King John stood on the castle walls. He spoke to all his people. He said,
"We must capture Robin Hood and his outlaws. They are our enemy. I can pay 100 pieces of gold for Robin Hood, dead or alive. Bring me that outlaw."
From that day on, Robin's life was in great danger. Chapter 5. Robin meets Maid Marian. When Robin Hood was a boy, his best friends were Marian Fitzwater and her brother Mark. Robin played with them and taught them to use the bow and arrow. He also taught them to fight with the sword. Robin loved only Maid Marian, and she loved only him. One spring day, Marian's father, Lord Robert Fitzwater of Malaset, said to her, "Marian, you are a beautiful maid. Soon you must marry. There is a very rich nobleman who wants to marry you."
"What is his name?"
Marian asked. "His name is Sir Guy of Gisborne, a good friend of the Sheriff of Nottingham." When Marian heard this, she was very unhappy. This was terrible. She did not want to marry Sir Guy of Gisborne. She loved Robin Hood and wanted to marry him. She decided to run away to join Robin Hood. She disguised herself as a knight. Then she took her horse and went to Sherwood Forest. Robin Hood was in the forest. He was coming from Nottingham and was disguised as a beggar. They met in the forest. It was evening, and it was almost dark. When Robin saw the knight, he asked,
"What are you doing in the forest?"
"What are you doing here, beggar man?"
answered the knight. They did not recognize each other.
"This is outlaw country. Go back. You can't stay here. We don't know you,"
Robin said.
"I cannot go back. I am not afraid of outlaws,"
answered the knight, taking out a sword.
"I am ready to fight you."
And so the fight began. Both were experts with the sword, but Robin fell to the ground. The knight said,
"Now take me to your leader. Take me to Robin Hood."
She took off her helmet, and Robin was very surprised. It was his dear Marian. Robin took off his beggar clothes. Marian recognized Robin. She too was very surprised. Then they kissed. There was great happiness in Sherwood Forest that evening. Marion and Robin were finally together. Friar Tuck married them after a few days. There was a big wedding celebration in the forest. Maid Marion was now part of Sherwood Forest. She was gentle and kind to all. Everyone loved her. Chapter 6. The Sheriff's Ride. Robin Hood's fame was everywhere. The people called him Saint Robin and Robin, Sheriff of Sherwood Forest. A lot of new outlaws joined Robin Hood. They were loyal to him and followed him everywhere. The sheriff's men did not want to go to Sherwood Forest to capture Robin Hood. They were afraid. The Sheriff of Nottingham was very angry. He wanted to capture Robin, dead or alive.
What is wrong with my men? They're afraid of Robin Hood. They're all stupid cowards. I don't need anyone. I'm going to Sherwood Forest alone. I'm not afraid of a legend.
The sheriff left for Sherwood Forest alone. He entered the dark forest and saw no one for a long time. Suddenly, a group of outlaws jumped down from the treetops. They made a big circle around the sheriff. Then they took out their swords. The sheriff was terrified. His face became white. One outlaw said, "Well, well, what do we have here? The Sheriff of Nottingham in person!"
Oh, please, don't kill me.
Said the cowardly sheriff.
I can give you everything I have.
The outlaws laughed at the sheriff and said, "Our master is waiting for you."
Robin Hood?
Asked the sheriff. Yes, Robin Hood. You are invited to eat with us.
I'm not hungry. Let me go. I can give you money, gold, jewels. But please, let me go.
The sheriff said. "Start walking, you butcher," said Will Scarlet. The outlaws took the sheriff to Robin Hood. Let's kill him, the outlaws cried. Let's kill this fat butcher now. Robin Hood looked at the sheriff with disgust. He wanted to kill him too, but Marion stopped him.
"We are not butchers like this man,"
said Marion.
"We are honest people."
Sit down and eat with us, Sheriff,
said Robin.
After the meal, I have a surprise for you.
The sheriff was not hungry. At the end of the meal, Robin said,
Now give us everything you have. Money, gold, jewels. Then take off all your clothes. Get on your horse and return to Nottingham naked.
Robin, Marion, and the outlaws laughed wildly. The sheriff got on his horse and returned to Nottingham. He was very cold and very angry.
I must capture that Robin Hood and destroy him,
shouted the sheriff. When he reached Nottingham, the people saw him naked. Everyone looked at him. They pointed at him and laughed loudly. Long live Robin Hood, the Sheriff of Sherwood Forest! They cried. Chapter 7. The Silver Arrow. After his adventure in Sherwood Forest, the Sheriff of Nottingham said to his men,
I must capture Robin Hood and destroy him. How can we capture him?
The sheriff thought for some time. Then he said,
I know how we can capture him. Let's have an archery competition here in Nottingham. The best archers of the region always come to the competition. The prize for the best archer is the famous silver arrow.
One of his men asked, But will Robin come to the competition?
Of course. Robin loves challenges,
said the sheriff.
He will come disguised, and we must discover him.
The sheriff's messengers went everywhere and told everyone about the competition. One day, Friar Tuck heard the news. He immediately told Robin and the outlaws. Robin said,
I'm the best archer in the region. I can easily win the silver arrow.
Oh, Robin, don't go,
said Marion.
It's a trap. The sheriff wants to kill you.
Yes, Robin,
said Friar Tuck.
it's a trap. It's dangerous for you to go.
I must go. I never refuse a challenge. I will disguise myself as a poor peasant. No one will recognize me.
Can we
come to protect you? Asked Robin's men.
Yes, you can come disguised as peasants too. You can stay in the crowd, but be ready to fight if necessary.
One morning in May, Robin and his outlaws went to the archery competition. When they arrived in Nottingham, the castle square was full of people. An archery competition was a special event. There were musicians, acrobats, children, lords and ladies. There were colourful flags everywhere. All around the castle square, there were difficult targets. There were many excellent archers at the contest. They all tried to hit the targets. But the best archer was the peasant in the red cloak and hood. He hit all the most difficult targets. The crowd shouted with joy. He was the winner. The sheriff was silent. He knew that the peasant with the red cloak and hood was Robin.
Guards, stop that peasant in the red cloak,
cried the angry sheriff.
He is our enemy, Robin Hood, the outlaw.
The sheriff's guards ran to capture Robin. But Robin's men attacked the guards. There was a lot of fighting. Robin and his men killed or injured most of the sheriff's men. Then they quickly left Nottingham and returned to Sherwood Forest. When they arrived, they celebrated their victory. Chapter 8. Alan a Dale. Robin and Marion were walking through the forest when they saw a young man sitting near a river. He was playing a lyre and singing a sad song.
Who are you, and why are you singing this sad song?
Asked Robin. My name is Alan of Barnsdale, but people call me Alan a Dale. I am very unhappy because I love a girl called Alice. She loves me too, but her father wants her to marry a rich old baron. The marriage is tomorrow at Papelwick Church. The young man was so unhappy that he started to cry. Robin and Marion looked at each other. Marion remembered her similar situation some time ago. Then Robin said,
I want to help you, Alan a Dale. I have a plan. Come with me.
Early the next morning, Robin sent his best archers to Papelwick. They hid inside the church and all around it. Robin, Friar Tuck, and Alan a Dale disguised themselves as simple peasants. Then they went to Papelwick. They entered the church and sat down. At midday, the bishop and the rich old baron entered the church. Then Alice arrived with her father. She wore a white dress and she had flowers in her hair. She was beautiful, but very sad and pale. When the bishop began the marriage ceremony, Robin stood up and said,
My lord, an ugly old man cannot marry this beautiful young woman. Winter cannot marry spring.
What?
Cried the bishop.
Sit down and be silent.
There is no love between that old man and this young woman. You must not marry them.
The bishop was furious. He cried,
Guards, arrest this peasant immediately.
At that moment, Robin's men stood up and pointed their bows and arrows at the guards. The guards did not move. The bishop ran out of the church. Alan a Dale ran to Alice and embraced her. "My sweet Alice, I want to marry you." Alice was very happy and said,
You are the only man I want to marry.
Friar Tuck married the happy couple at Papelwick Church. Then everyone returned to Sherwood Forest to enjoy the wedding banquet. Alan a Dale and Alice lived in Sherwood Forest with Robin, Marion, and the Outlaw. Chapter 9. A Stranger in the Forest. One evening, Robin was hunting in the forest. He saw a knight riding an old, tired horse. The knight wore the red cross of the Crusader.
"Good evening, young man,"
said the knight.
"What is the name of this forest?"
This is Sherwood Forest, sir,
answered Robin.
"I have come from the Holy Land. I was there for many years. I fought many wars against the Turks. Now I am very tired and hungry,"
said the knight. Robin said,
Brave knight, come and eat with me and my men. You can stay with us tonight.
"Thank you for your offer. I am happy to accept it."
The two men rode through the forest together. Robin told the stranger about greedy King John and his wicked sheriff. He told him how the poor people suffered. He explained why he became an outlaw. The stranger listened carefully. There was a good meal of roast pork that evening. The stranger liked the merry company of Robin, Marion, and the outlaws. He talked about his adventures in the Holy Land. At the end of the meal, Robin stood up and said,
Let us drink to good King Richard and to his return.
Everyone cheered and drank to good King Richard and to his return.
To King Richard!
Then the stranger stood up, took off his head covering, and said,
"My friends, I must tell you the truth. I am not a knight. I am your King Richard, also called the Lionheart."
There was silence for a moment. The surprise was so great. Then everyone at the table cheered and cried, "Welcome home, King Richard!" Everyone knelt down. Robin said,
We thank God for King Richard's return.
"I am a lucky king. I have loyal people,"
said King Richard, with tears in his eyes.
"I know that my brother John and his men are dishonest and greedy. Now I am here to punish the bad and bring justice to all."
King Richard looked at everyone and said,
"You are not outlaws anymore. You are now free men, and all friends of mine. Robin, the lands of Locksley are yours again. You can all leave Sherwood Forest and live as free men."
There was great excitement in the air. That night, King Richard slept in Sherwood Forest. The following morning, he rode to Nottingham with Robin, Marion, and his friends of Sherwood Forest. When the sheriff saw them, he ran away and never returned. After the king's return, Robin, Marion, and Little John went to Locksley. They lived a long and happy life. Some of the outlaws returned to their old homes and villages. Some went looking for adventure. Others became soldiers in the king's army. In everyone's heart, there was a beautiful memory of the years spent in Sherwood Forest.
Mr. Harris and the Night Train. Mr. Harris liked trains. He was afraid of aeroplanes and didn't like buses. But trains, they were big and noisy and exciting. When he was a boy of 10, he liked trains. Now he was a man of 50, and he still liked trains. So he was a happy man on the night of the 14th of September. He was on the night train from Helsinki to Oulu in Finland, and he had 10 hours in front of him. "I've got a book and my newspaper," he thought, "and there's a good restaurant on the train. And then I've got 2 weeks' holiday with my Finnish friends in Oulu." There weren't many people on the train, and nobody came into Mr. Harris's carriage. He was happy about that. Most people on the train slept through the night, but Mr. Harris liked to look out of the window and to read and think. After dinner in the restaurant, Mr. Harris came back to his carriage and sat in his seat next to the window. For an hour or two he watched the trees and lakes of Finland out of the window. Then it began to get dark, so he opened his book and began to read. At midnight the train stopped at the small station of Ottawa. Mr. Harris looked out of the window, but he saw nobody. The train moved away from the station into the black night again. Then the door of Mr. Harris's carriage opened, and 2 people came in, a young man and a young woman. The young woman was angry. She closed the door and shouted at the man, "Carl, you can't do this to me!" The young man laughed loudly and sat down. Mr. Harris was a small, quiet man. He wore quiet clothes, and he had a quiet voice. He did not like noisy people and loud voices, so he was not pleased. "Young people are always noisy," he thought. "Why can't they talk quietly?" He put his book down and closed his eyes. But he could not sleep, because the 2 young people didn't stop talking. The young woman sat down and said in a quieter voice, "Carl, you're my brother, and I love you. But please listen to me. You can't take my diamond necklace. Give it back to me now, please." Carl smiled. "No, Elena," he said. "I'm going back to Russia soon, and I'm taking your diamonds with me." He took off his hat and put it on the seat. "Elena, listen. You have a rich husband, but I have no money. I have nothing. How can I live without money? You can't give me money, so I need your diamonds, little sister." Mr. Harris looked at the young woman. She was small, with black hair and dark eyes. Her face was white and afraid. Mr. Harris began to feel sorry for Elena. She and her brother didn't look at him once. "Can't they see me?" he thought. "Carl," Elena said. Her voice was very quiet now, and Mr. Harris listened carefully. "You came to dinner at our house tonight, and you went to my room and took my diamond necklace. How could you do that to me? My husband gave the diamonds to me. They were his mother's diamonds before that. He's going to be very, very angry, and I'm afraid of him." Her brother laughed. He put his hand in his pocket, then took it out again and opened it slowly. The diamond necklace in his hand was very beautiful. Mr. Harris stared at it. For a minute or two nobody moved, and it was quiet in the carriage. There was only the noise of the train, and it went quickly on through the dark, cold night. Mr. Harris opened his book again, but he didn't read it. He watched Carl's face, with its hungry eyes and its cold smile. "What beautiful, beautiful diamonds," Carl said. "I can get a lot of money for these." "Give them back to me, Carl," Elena whispered. My husband's going to kill me. You're my brother. Please help me. Please. Carl laughed again, and Mr. Harris wanted to hit him. Go home, little sister, Carl said. I'm not going to give the diamonds back to you. Go home to your angry husband. Suddenly there was a knife in the young woman's hand, a long, bright knife. Mr. Harris watched with his mouth open. He couldn't speak or move. "Give the diamonds back to me," Elena cried, "or I'm going to kill you." Her hand on the knife was white. Carl laughed and laughed. "What a sister," he said. "What a kind, sweet sister. No, they're my diamonds now. Put your knife away, little sister." But the knife in the white hand moved quickly, up, then down. There was a long, terrible cry, and Carl's body fell slowly onto the seat. The colour of the seat began to change to red, and the diamond necklace fell from Carl's hand onto the floor. Elena's face was white. "Oh, no," she whispered. "Carl, come back. Come back. I didn't want to kill you." But Carl didn't answer, and the red blood ran slowly over the floor. Elena put her head in her hands, and again in the carriage there was a long, terrible cry. Mr. Harris's face was white too. He opened his mouth, but he couldn't speak. He stood up and carefully moved to the door. The young woman was quiet now. She didn't move or look up at Mr. Harris. In the corridor, Mr. Harris ran. The guard was at the back of the train, and Mr. Harris got there in half a minute. "Quickly," Mr. Harris said. "Come quickly. An accident. A young woman. Oh, dear. Her brother he's dead." The guard ran with Mr. Harris back to the carriage. Mr. Harris opened the door, and they went inside. There was no dead body of a young man. There was no young woman. No blood. No knife. No diamond necklace. Only Mr. Harris's bags and his hat and coat. The guard looked at Mr. Harris, and Mr. Harris looked at him. "But," Mr. Harris began. "But they were here. I saw them. The young woman, she had a knife, and she killed her brother." "A knife, you say?" the guard asked. "Yes," Mr. Harris said quickly. "A long knife. And her brother took her diamonds, so she—" "Ah, diamonds," the guard said. "Was the young woman's name Elena?" he asked. "Yes, it was," Mr. Harris said. "How do you know that? Do you know her?" "Yes, and no," the guard said slowly. He thought for a minute, then looked at Mr. Harris. "Elena di Saronelli," he said. "She had dark eyes and black hair. Very beautiful. She was half Italian, half Finnish. Her brother was a half-brother. They had the same father, but his mother was Russian, I think." "Was? Had?" Mr. Harris stared at the guard. "But Elena, she's alive. And where is she?" "Oh, no," said the guard. "Elena di Saronelli died about 80 years ago. After she killed her brother with a knife, she jumped off the train and died at once. It was near here, I think." He looked out of the window into the night. Mr. Harris's face was very white again. 80 years ago?" he whispered. "What are you saying? Were she and her brother—" "But I saw them." "Yes, that's right," the guard said. "You saw them, but they're not alive. They're ghosts. They often come on the night train at this time in September. I never see them, but somebody saw them last year. A man and his wife. They were very unhappy about it. But what can I do? I can't stop Elena and Carl coming on the train. The guard looked at Mr. Harris's white face. "You need a drink," he said. "Come and have a vodka with me." Mr. Harris didn't usually drink vodka, but he felt afraid. When he closed his eyes, he could see again Elena's long knife, and could hear her terrible cry. So he went with the guard to the back of the train. After the vodka, Mr. Harris felt better. He didn't want to sleep, and the guard was happy to talk. So Mr. Harris stayed with the guard and didn't go back to his carriage. "Yes," the guard said, "it's a famous story. I don't remember it all. It happened a long time ago, of course. Elena's father was a famous man here in Finland. He was very rich once, but he had 3 or 4 wives and about 8 children. And he liked the good things of life, so there wasn't much money for the children. Carl, the oldest son, was a bad man, people say. He wanted an easy life and money in his hand all the time." The train hurried on to Oulu through the black night, and the guard drank some more vodka. "Now, Elena," he said, "she didn't have an easy life with those 3 difficult men, her father, her brother, her husband. One year she visited her mother's family in Italy, and there she met her husband, Di Saronelli. He was rich, but he wasn't a kind man. They came back to Finland, and Carl often visited their house. He wanted money from his sister's rich husband. Elena loved her brother, and gave him some money, but Di Saronelli didn't like Carl and was angry with Elena. He stopped giving her money, and after that, well, you know the story now." "Yes," Mr. Harris said. "Poor, unhappy Elena." Mr. Harris stayed with his friends in Oulu for 2 weeks. They were quiet weeks, and Mr. Harris had a good holiday. But he took the bus back to Helsinki. The bus was slow, and there were a lot of people on it, but Mr. Harris was very happy. He didn't want to take the night train across Finland again.
The £1 Million Banknote by Mark Twain. Part 1. From San Francisco to London. When I was 27 years old, I worked in an office in San Francisco. I did my job well, and my future was promising. I was alone in the world, and I was happy. On Saturday afternoons, I didn't work. I sailed my little sailboat on San Francisco Bay. One Saturday afternoon, I sailed out too far. The strong afternoon wind pushed my sailboat out of the bay and into the Pacific Ocean. That night, when I had lost all hope, a small British brig saw me and took me on board. The brig was sailing to London. The voyage was long and stormy. I worked as a sailor to pay for my trip. When I arrived in London, my clothes were old and dirty. I had only $1 in my pocket. With this dollar, I ate and slept for the first 24 hours. During the next 24 hours, I didn't eat and I didn't sleep. At about 10 o'clock the following morning, I went to Portland Place. I saw a child walking past holding a big pear. The child ate one small piece and then threw the pear onto the street. I stopped and looked at it. I was very hungry and I really wanted that pear. But every time I tried to get it, someone passed by and looked at me. I quickly turned in the other direction and waited for the person to pass by. I tried again and again to get that pear, but the same thing happened. I was desperate. I decided to get the pear and not to worry about the people who saw me. At that moment, a gentleman opened a window behind me and said,
"Come in here, please."
A well-dressed servant opened the door. He took me to a beautiful room. Here, two old gentlemen were sitting and discussing something important. Their breakfast was still on the table. I was very hungry, and I stared at their breakfast. I want to tell the reader that the two gentlemen had made a bet several days before. I knew nothing about the bet until later. Let me tell you what happened. Part 2. An Unusual Bet. The two old gentlemen were brothers. For several days they argued about a very strange subject. They decided to end their argument with a bet, as the English usually do. The following was the subject of the bet. The Bank of England issued 2 banknotes of £1,000,000 each for a public transaction with a foreign country. England used one banknote, and the other remained in the bank. At this point, Brother A said to Brother B,
"If an honest and intelligent stranger arrives in London without a friend and without money, except for the £1,000,000 banknote, he will starve to death."
Brother B answered,
No, I don't agree.
Brother A said,
"If he goes to the bank or anywhere else to change this big note, the police will put him in prison. Everyone will think he stole it."
They continued arguing for days, until Brother B said,
I'll bet £20,000 that the stranger will live for 30 days with the banknote and not go to prison.
Brother A accepted the bet. He went to the bank and bought the £1,000,000 banknote. After, he returned home and prepared a letter. Then the two brothers sat by the window and waited for the right man for the bet. They saw a lot of honest faces go by, but they were not intelligent enough. Several faces were intelligent, but they were not honest. A lot of faces were honest and intelligent, but they were not poor enough. Other faces were honest, intelligent, and poor, but they were not strangers. When they saw me from the window, they thought I was the right man. They asked me questions, and soon they knew my story. Finally, they told me I was the right man for the bet. I asked them to explain the bet. One of the gentlemen gave me an envelope. I wanted to open it, but he said,
No, don't open it now. Wait until you are in your hotel room. Then read it very carefully.
I was confused, and I wanted to discuss the subject with them, but they didn't. I felt hurt because I was the subject of a joke. When I left their house, I looked for the pear on the street. It was gone. I was quite angry with those two gentlemen. Far from their house, I opened the envelope. I saw that there was money inside. I didn't stop to read their letter. I ran to the nearest eating place. I ate and ate and ate. At last, I took out the envelope with the money to pay for my meal. I looked at the banknote and almost fainted. It was a banknote worth $5 million. I was speechless. I stared at the banknote. The two gentlemen had made a big mistake. They probably wanted to give me a 1-pound banknote. I saw the owner of the eating place staring at the banknote too. We were both surprised. I did not know what to do or say, so I simply gave him the note and said, "Give me the change, please." The owner apologized 1,000 times.
I'm very sorry, but I can't change this banknote, sir.
"I don't have any other money. Please, change this note," the owner then said.
You can pay for this food whenever you want, sir. I understand that you are a very rich gentleman. You like playing jokes on people by dressing like a poor man. You can come here and eat all you want, whenever you want. You can pay me when you want.
Part 3. The Letter. When I left the eating place, I hurried to the house of the two gentlemen. I wanted to correct the mistake they had made. I was very nervous. When I arrived, the same servant opened the door. I asked for the two gentlemen.
They are gone.
The servant said. Gone? Gone where?
Oh, on a journey.
But where did they go?
To the continent, I think.
The continent?
Yes, sir.
When will they return?
In a month.
A month? Oh, this is awful. How can I talk to them? It's extremely important.
I can't help you. I don't know where they are, sir.
Then I must see a member of the family.
All the family are away. They're in Egypt and India, I think.
Before leaving, the two gentlemen made an enormous mistake. They will certainly return home tonight. Tell them that I came here to correct the mistake. I'll return tomorrow.
I'll tell them if I see them, but I won't see them. Sir, you must not worry, because everything is all right. They will be here on time, and they will see you then. Goodbye.
I was confused. My head was in a fog. I did not understand what the servant told me. The letter. I remembered the letter. This is what it said.
You are an intelligent and honest man. You are also poor and a stranger. In this envelope you will find some money. It is yours only for 30 days. At the end of 30 days, return to this house. I have a bet on you. If I win this bet, you can have any job with any salary that you want.
There were no signature, no address, no date on the letter. How strange. I didn't know what to think. I went to a park, sat down, and thought about what to do. After an hour, I reached the decision that follows. The two old gentlemen are playing a game that I don't understand. They are betting on me. But at that time, I didn't know anything about the details of the bet. If I go to the Bank of England to return the banknote, the bank will ask me lots of questions. If I tell the truth, no one will believe me. They will put me in an asylum. If I tell a lie, the police will put me in prison. I can't even give it to anyone because no honest person will want it. I can do only one thing. I must keep the bill for a whole month, and I must not lose it. If I help the old man to win his bet, he'll give me the job I want. The idea of an important job with a big salary made me happy. With this exciting idea in mind, I began walking down the streets of London. Part 4. At the tailor's. Every time I passed in front of a tailor's, I wanted to enter and buy some new clothes. But I had no money to pay for them. The £1 million banknote in my pocket was useless. I passed in front of the same tailor's 6 times. At last, I entered. I quietly asked if they had an old, unattractive suit that no one wanted to buy. The man I spoke to nodded his head, but he didn't speak. Then another man looked at me and nodded his head. I went to him, and he said,
"One moment, please."
After some time, he took me to a back room. He looked at several ugly suits that no one wanted. He chose the worst for me. I really wanted a suit, so I said nothing. It was time to pay. "Can you wait a few days for the money? I haven't got any small change with me." The man said,
"Oh, you haven't? Well, I thought gentlemen like you carried large change."
"My friend," I replied, "you can't judge a stranger by the clothes he wears. I can pay for this suit, but can you change a large banknote?"
"Oh, of course we can change a large banknote,"
he said coldly. I gave him the banknote. He received it with a smile, a big smile that covered his face. When he read the banknote, his smile disappeared. The owner of the shop came over and asked me,
What's the trouble?
"There isn't any trouble. I'm waiting for my change."
Come, give him his change, Todd, quickly.
Todd answered.
"It's easy to say, but look at the banknote."
The owner looked at the banknote. Then he looked at my package with the ugly suit.
Todd!
He shouted.
You're stupid! How can you sell this unattractive suit to a millionaire? Todd, you can't see the difference between a millionaire and a poor man. I apologize, sir.
The owner continued.
Please take off those things you are wearing and throw them in the fire. Put on this fine shirt and this handsome suit. It's perfect for you. Simple, but elegant.
I told him I was very happy with the new suit.
Oh, wait until you see what we can make for you in your size. Todd, bring a pen and a book. Let me measure your leg, your arm.
I didn't have a moment to speak. The owner measured me. Then he ordered his tailors to make me morning suits, evening suits, shirts, coats, and other things. "But, my dear sir," I said, "I can order all these things only if you change my banknote, or if you can wait a while before I pay you."
Wait a while? I'll wait forever. That's the word. Todd, send these things to the gentleman's address. Let the less important customers wait.
"What's your address, sir?"
"I'm changing my home. I'll come back and give you my new address," I replied.
Quite right, sir, quite right. Let me show you to the door, sir. Good day, sir. Good day.
Part 5. The Poor Millionaire. The impossible happened. I bought everything I wanted without money. I showed my banknote and asked for change, but every time the same thing happened. No one was able to change it. I bought all that I needed and all the luxuries that I wanted. I stayed at an expensive hotel in Hanover Square. I always had dinner at the hotel, but I preferred having breakfast at Harris's simple eating place. Harris's was the first place where I had a good meal with my £1 million note. That's where it all started. The news about me and my banknote was all over London. Harris's eating place became famous because I had breakfast there. Harris was happy with all his new customers. I lived like a rich, important man. I had money to spend. I lived in a dream. But often I said to myself, remember, This dream will end when the two men return to London. Everything will change. My story was in the newspapers. Everyone talked about the strange millionaire with the £1,000,000 note in his pocket. Punch magazine drew a funny picture of me on the front page. People talked about everything I did and about everything I said. They followed me in the streets. I kept my old clothes, and sometimes I wore them. It was fun when the shop owners thought I was poor. Then I showed them the banknote, and oh, how their faces changed. After 10 days in London, I went to visit the American ambassador. He was very happy to meet me. He invited me to a dinner party that evening. He told me that he knew my father from Yale University. He invited me to visit his home whenever I wanted. I was glad to have a new, important friend. I thought to myself, I'll need an important friend when the story of the £1,000,000 note and bet comes out. I want the reader to know that I plan to pay back all the shop owners who sold me things on credit. If I win the bet for the old gentleman, I thought, I will have an important job. With an important job, I will have a big salary. I planned to pay back everyone with my first year's salary. Part 6. The Dinner Party. There were 14 people at the dinner party. The Duke and Duchess of Shoreditch and their daughter, Lady Anne Grace Eleanor de Bohun, the Earl and Countess of Newgate, Viscount Cheapside, Lord and Lady Blatherskite, the ambassador, and his wife and daughter, and some other people. There was also a beautiful 22-year-old English girl named Portia Langham. I fell in love with her in 2 minutes, and she with me. After a while, the house servant presented another guest, Mr. Lloyd Hastings. When Mr. Hastings saw me, he said,
I think I know you.
Yes, you probably do.
Are you the...
Yes, I'm the strange millionaire with the £1,000,000 note in his pocket.
Well, this is a surprise. I never thought you were the same Henry Adams from San Francisco. 6 months ago, you were working in the offices of Blake Hopkins in San Francisco. I remember clearly. You had a very small salary, and at night you helped me arrange the papers for the Gould and Curry Mining Company. Now you're a millionaire, a celebrity here in London. I can't believe it. How exciting.
I can't believe it either, Lloyd.
Just 3 months ago, we went to the Miners' Restaurant.
No, it was the What Cheer restaurant.
Right, it was the What Cheer. We went there at 2 o'clock in the morning. We had steak and coffee. That night we worked for 6 long hours on the Gould and Curry Mining Company papers. Do you remember, Henry? I asked you to come to London with me. I wanted you to help me sell the Gould and Curry gold mine shares, but you refused.
Of course I remember. I didn't want to leave my job in San Francisco. And I still think it's difficult to sell shares of a California gold mine here in London.
You were right, Henry. You were so right, It is impossible to sell these shares here in London. My plan failed and I spent all my money. I don't want to talk about it.
But you must talk about it. When we leave the dinner party, you must tell me what happened.
Oh, can I? I really need to talk to a friend.
Lloyd said with water in his eyes. Yes, I want to hear the whole story, every word of it.
Thank you, Henry. You are a true friend.
At this point, it was time for dinner. Thanks to the English system of precedence, there was no dinner. The Duke of Shoreditch wanted to sit at the head of the table. The American ambassador also wanted to sit at the head of the table. It was impossible for them to decide, so we had no dinner. The English know about the system of precedence. They have dinner before going out to dinner. But strangers know nothing about it. They remain hungry all evening. Instead, we had a dish of sardines and a strawberry. Now it was time for everyone to play a game called cribbage. The English never play a game for fun. They play to win or to lose something. Miss Langham and I played the game, but with little interest. I looked at her beautiful face and said, "Miss Langham, I love you."
"Mr. Adams,"
she said softly and smiled.
"I love you too."
This was a wonderful evening. Miss Langham and I were very happy. We smiled, laughed, and talked. I was honest with her. I told her that I was poor and that I didn't have a cent in the world. I explained that the £1,000,000 note was not mine. She was very curious to know more. I told her the whole story from the start. She laughed and laughed. She thought the story was very funny. I didn't understand why it was funny. I also explained that I needed an important job with a big salary to pay all my debts. "Portia, dear, can you come with me on the day I must meet those two gentlemen?"
"Well, yes, if I can help you,"
she replied. "Of course you can help me. You're so lovely that when the two gentlemen see you, I can ask for any job and any salary. With you there, my sweet Portia, the two gentlemen won't refuse me anything." Part 7. A $1,000,000 Idea. At the end of the dinner party, I returned to the hotel with Hastings. He talked about his problems, but I didn't listen to him. I was thinking about Portia the whole time. When we arrived at the hotel, Hastings said,
"Let me just stand here and look at this marvelous hotel. It's a palace. What expensive furniture. You have everything you want. You are rich, Henry, and I am poor."
His words scared me. I, too, was poor. I didn't have a cent in the world, and I had debts to pay. I needed to win the gentleman's bet. This was my last hope. Hastings didn't know the truth.
"Henry, just a tiny part of your income can save me. I'm desperate,"
Hastings cried. "My dear Hastings, sit down here and drink this hot whiskey. Now, tell me your whole story, every word of it."
"Do you want to hear my story again?"
"But you never told me your story."
"Of course I told you my story as we walked to the hotel. Don't you remember?"
"I didn't hear one word of it."
"Henry, are you ill? Is something wrong with you? What did you drink at the dinner party?"
"Oh, Hastings, I'm in love. I can only think about my sweet Portia. This is why I didn't hear your story before." Hastings got up from his chair, shook my hand, and laughed.
"I'm very happy for you, Henry. Very happy,"
he said, smiling.
"I'll tell you the whole story again."
So he sat down and patiently started to tell me his story. To make a long story short, the owners of the Gould and Curry gold mine sent Henry to England to sell the shares of the mine for $1,000,000. Any money he received over $1,000,000 was his to keep. Hastings' dream was to sell the shares for more than $1,000,000 and become rich. He had only 1 month to sell the shares. He had done everything to sell them, but nobody wanted to buy them. Then he jumped up and cried,
"Henry, you can help me. Will you do it?"
"Tell me how."
"Give me $1,000,000, and I'll sell you all the shares. You will be the new owner of the gold mine. Don't refuse."
I didn't know what to say. I wanted to tell Hastings the truth, but then an intelligent idea came to me. I thought about it for a moment, and then calmly said, "I will save you, Lloyd."
"Then I am already saved. How can I thank you?"
"Let me finish, Lloyd. I will save you, but not in that way. I have a better way. I know everything about that mine. I know its great value. You will sell the shares by using my name. You can send anyone to me. Since people in London know me, I will guarantee the gold mine. In a week or two, you will sell the shares for $3,000,000 by using my name, and will share the money you earn, half to you and half to me. Lloyd was very happy and excited. He danced around the room and laughed.
I can use your name! Your name! Think of it! The rich Londoners will run to buy these shares. I'm saved! And I'll never forget you, Henry.
Part 8. Back to Portland Place. The next day, all of London talked about the shares of the California gold mine. I stayed in my hotel and said to everyone who came to me, "Yes, I know Mr. Hastings. He's a very honest man, and I know the gold mine, because I lived in the California gold country. It is a mine of great value." People were now interested in buying the shares. I spent every evening with Portia at the American ambassador's house. I didn't tell her about the shares and the mine. It was a surprise. We talked about our love and our future together. Finally, the end of the month arrived. Lots of rich Londoners bought the shares of the mine. I had $1 million of my own in the London and County Bank, and Lloyd did too. It was time to meet with the two old gentlemen. I dressed in my best clothes, and I went to get Portia. Before going to Portland Place, Portia and I talked about the job and the salary. "Portia, you are so beautiful. When the two gentlemen meet you, they'll give me any job and any salary I ask for."
Henry, please remember that if we ask for too much, we will get nothing. Then what will happen to us?
Don't be afraid, Portia. When we arrived, the same servant opened the door. There were the two old gentlemen having tea. They were surprised to see Portia. I introduced her to them. Then I said, "Gentlemen, I am ready to report to you."
"We are pleased to hear this,"
said one gentleman.
"Now we can decide the bet that my brother Abel and I made. If you won for me, you can have any job in my power. Do you have the £1 million note?"
"Here it is, sir," and I gave it to him.
"I won!"
he shouted.
"Now what do you say, Abel?"
I say he survived, and I lost £20,000. I can't believe it.
"I have more to tell you," I said. "But it's a long story. I'll tell you another time. For now, look at this."
What? A certificate of deposit for £200,000? Is it yours?
"It's mine. I earned it by using the banknote you lent me for a month."
"This is astonishing. I can't believe it."
Portia looked at me with surprise and said,
Henry, is that really your money? You didn't tell me the truth.
"No, I didn't, but I know you'll forgive me."
Don't be so sure. You told me a lie, Henry.
"Dearest Portia, it was only for fun. Come, let's go now,"
"But wait,
my gentleman said.
I want to give you the job and the salary you choose."
Thank you with all my heart, but I don't want the job."
Henry, you didn't thank the good gentleman in the right way. Can I do it for you?
Portia said. "Of course you can, my dear." Portia walked to my gentleman, sat on his lap, and kissed him on the mouth. Then the two old gentlemen shouted and laughed. I was amazed. What was happening?
Papa,
said Portia.
Henry doesn't want your job. I feel very hurt.
Darling, is that your father? I asked.
Yes, he's my stepfather, a dear man. Now do you understand why I laughed when you told me your story?
My dearest sir, I said, I want to take back what I said. There is a job that I want.
Tell me.
I want the job of son-in-law.
Well. But you were never a son-in-law before. Do you know how to do this job?
Try me, please. Try me for 30 or 40 years, and if...
All right. Take her.
Were Portia and I happy? There aren't enough words in the dictionary to describe our happiness. When the Londoners heard the whole story of my adventures with the banknote, they talked of nothing else. Portia's father took the banknote back to the Bank of England and cashed it. Then he gave us the cancelled banknote as a wedding present. We put it in a picture frame and hung it on the wall in our new home. And so, I always say, yes, it's £1 million banknote, but it only bought one thing in its life, the most valuable thing in the world, Portia.